Today we start with the cranium, the skull bone. Now, the interior view of the skull bone is this, is in which you show the front of the face, how your face will look when you see the front of the face. This is the front of your cranium, the interior view of the skull. The skull consists of cranial bones and the facial bones. Now, the cranial bones are the frontal bones, the parietal bones, the temporal bones, and the occipital bones. Now, the occipital bone is the backbone. Okay, the frontal bone is your front forehead bone. The parietal and the temporal bones are the lateral bones. Here it shows the various bones like it's showing you the various bones of your face, like the frontal squamma at the front, now the coronal suture at the side, the supraorbital foramen, here the supraorbital foramen. Okay, now below the supraorbital foramen is the supraorbital margin. Now below the margin you can see the optic foramen, from where the optic nerve is passes. Then there is superior orbital fissure. Then there is you can see the temporal bone at the side, the purple color temporal bone. Now below that you can see this, the nasal bones, the two nasal bones, the pink colored nasal bones. Now there is inferior orbital fissure, there is superior orbital fissure, and there is inferior orbital fissure. Now after that you can see the next thing is the middle nasal concha. That is, this is a middle nasal, it is called as the middle nasal concha. Below that there is infraorbital foramen, there is supraorbital foramen, there is infraorbital foramen. Okay, this present in the maxilla, the maxillary bone, the yellow colored maxillary bone. Now there is the alveolar processes of the maxilla to bear the tooth of the upper jaw, that is the alveolar process of maxilla. Okay, now lower there is alveolar process of mandible. The upper is maxilla and lower is mandible, in the lower mandible bone. Okay, in the left side you can see there is as after the frontal bone, in the frontal squamma there is parietal bone, the side bones, the lateral bone of the skull is the parietal bone, and below the parietal bone there is temporal bone. This there is a purple colored temporal bone below the parietal bone. Okay, now in parietal bone there below this parietal bone there is supraorbital notch. A notch is present in the supraorbital margin, that is called as supraorbital notch. Below the supraorbital notch there is you can see it's written squamous suture. The various sutures which are present, like coronal suture, in the coronal plane there is coronal suture, and below the coronal suture there is squamous suture. Okay, is there, this is the lateral suture between the parietal and the temporal bone. Okay, now there is sphenoid bone, the green small sphenoid bone connecting the frontal, temporal, and the parietal bone. There is a sphenoid bone. Now orbit is the space to keep the eyes, the eyeballs are present in this orbit. Okay, now in between, and there is the nasal bones are different, ethmoid bone, palatine bone, lacrimal bone. These are the various small bones present in the orbit. Now below the orbit there is zygomaticofacial foramen. A small foramens for the various arteries and the veins are present, so that is, the other is zygomaticofacial foramen. Okay, now the next is the zygomatic boom. There is